This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Warning. This episode contains mentions of suicide, which may be distressing to some listeners. I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that swaps out the depressing news headlines for stories of hope that won't make the front page. Each episode, we meet someone who's had a bit of a hard road but has found hope and healing along the way. Hopefully, they inspire you to look for the good in your own life as well. Episode 6, Tutt. Tutt has always been a curious soul. A proud Kamilaroi man, he spent his childhood catching lizards and snakes and reading books about reptiles. He lives and breathes his passion for science. So when he found out that some schools in remote communities across Australia didn't have science books at all, or any books for that matter, he did a very reasonable thing. He packed up every single book he owned and sent them to schools that needed it. And that one act sparked something in Corey. A burning passion to share science with other Indigenous kids. And from there, Deadly Science was born, an initiative which has provided over 16,000 science books to Indigenous kids across the country. But according to Corey, science is about more than just these books. It saved his life. Let's start at the beginning. Who is Corey Tutt? What do you like to do? What makes you happy?
Well, I'm always constantly trying to find what makes me happy. My life started back in July 19th, 1992, and I was born in Shoalhaven Hospital, which is down in the South Coast. And, I grew up without a dad because my dad left when I was 2, and that was an unfortunate situation because it was, due to a bit of domestic violence. When I was 8 years old, I witnessed a pretty nasty accident, and that accumulated in the death of one of my classmates, and that was down at Bullard, and that was pretty hard for me as a young person.
Corey didn't have the best start to life, but he always had a passion for nature, thanks to a very special person.
When I was younger, I had a grandfather that was really good to me, and he was probably the best natural world scientist that I'd ever met. And he gave me a book called Reptiles in Colour by Harold Coggan, and that was from 1982. And to give you context, I got it in 1998, and I was pretty old and ragged at that stage, and it had another little boy's signature in it. And it was quite a common trait of my pop and my family to get stuff from op shops. And this book in particular, I loved because it was mine and I got to read it. And I was kind of forced to read it because my pop sort of noticed early on that I had a really strong interest in reptiles and animals. And, that was encouraged from a really young age. And I'm really glad that happened because by the time I was 16, I'd gone through the schooling system and I wasn't necessarily the best student. I was pretty smart, but I was never really the best student because the schooling system didn't really fit me. When I was younger, I'd rather be out in the paddocks picking up lizards and snakes than probably sitting down and listening to mathematics and, and being an Indigenous kid as well. Like I kind of was put in the classes with the other Aboriginal kids. Like these were things that they did to help us and for a bit, they did help us, but I think that the segregation made it kind of worse. At 16, I don't think I really wanted to leave school, but, I kind of wanted something a bit different in my life. And I sat across from my careers advisor and he told me, what do you want to be when you leave school? And I told him, I want to be wildlife presenter. I wanted to be Harry Butler. And Harry Butler's from like 1970s. But I got his videotapes when I was a kid, so I really loved it.
Now, let's have a look at you. Give you something to chew on, you can have a go at my hat. There you are. And away we go.
And the other thing that I really wanted to be a zookeeper. But for me, like he said, to be a zookeeper, you have to go and do X amount of degrees in zoology. You have to be really smart at maths. You're not really smart at maths, even though I was pretty smart at maths. But, I think the education system sort of failed to see how smart I was. I even hacked the computer system when I was a kid at the high school and unblocked MySpace to talk to a girl I liked at another school. I hacked the debt portal login, the unhackable, thing, and I managed to do it and recode it so I could unblock websites with my login. So I was pretty smart when I wanted to be. He said to me, he goes, stick to a trade, go and do plumbing, go and do, become a sparky or whatever. You're probably not smart enough to be a sparky, but do a trade, just go and become a labourer. Or you're probably going to end up dead or in jail, because that's what happens to kids like you.
Shocking as it seems, and let me tell you, I was shocked. This was a common story throughout Corey's life, and indeed the lives of many Indigenous kids across this country. But Corey says that it was that sentence that stopped him from taking a different path.
It was kind of he was being cruel to be kind. So I don't want to put any heat on him for that, because if he hadn't have said those words to me, I wouldn't be here today. There's no way I would have taken that route.
Corey left school after completing his school certificate at the end of year 10. He worked some odd jobs and volunteered before landing a job at a zoo. His dream of becoming a zookeeper had officially started.
I learnt responsibility because, I could barely feed myself as a 16-year-old, but I had to look after joeys, I had to look after an emu, I had to look after 2 dogs, had to do this stuff. So I had to learn. I worked at this place called Narra Wildlife Park. I absolutely loved working there. I found it really hard at first because I started volunteering there, and the head keeper knew I was really keen, but he kind of bullied me to sort of, because I was very fresh and very raw, and I was so keen to get into the work, and I was very very keen, very excited, and I always sort of stayed that way. And he was like, well, why are you so excited to go and shovel poo? But I loved the idea of proving him wrong. And I loved the idea of he made it his mission to make me leave in the first, few months of working there, to the point where I would work my way up and I'd be going and doing shows, and he would sort of get in there and be like, you're not any good, and embarrass me in front of all the public and stuff. What? But, it was really good because it made me a better zookeeper. It made me a really good zookeeper. It made me a really good presenter as well. And I learned a lot from him, and actually we're friends now. We're really good friends.
Corey had to hustle and prove himself, but the passion for the work prevailed and he grew to love his job. But just on the cusp of adulthood, tragedy struck again for Corey and would change the course of his entire life.
Just before my 18th birthday, and this is a bit of a trigger warning, but my best friend committed suicide, which I found really, really hard, because that love of animals, that, that passion that I had, I lost it. And it is a really scary thing when you are a passionate person and you've got a burning desire and passion for things. When you lose it, it is like losing a limb. It is like, I was kind of broken on the inside. I was struggling a little bit. And, like all good stories, I was sitting sort of in my parents' kitchen, and I was reading. My stepdad used to get the newspaper, the Illawarra Mercury, every Friday, and I'm reading it, and I saw this ad in the paper for an alpaca handler, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. I'm feeding a crocodile at the moment. I can do that. I've kind of left the zoo now. The zoo that I still love the zoo. I still talk to the owner every now and again, and I was so broken and so besotted by, the whole idea of working in a zoo was just too much for me. I just had to leave. And I ended up, becoming an alpaca handler, so to speak. And I feel stupid now. I went to this guy's house because I rang the number in the ad, and he's like, I'll come to my house for a job interview. So I put on my year 10 formal suit, and I got off to this guy's house, And my year 10 formal suit, to explain to you how ridiculous it looked, I had a black shirt, silk shirt, like a satin shirt, white suspenders, a white belt,
Very
black pants.
nice.
It was a bit punky. I was a bit of a punk back then, and I wore this to this guy's house. We sat down, we had a cup of tea, and it turned out he goes, "Oh, you start Monday." And I'm like, "What?" And then later on, I realized I was the only person that interviewed for the job. So I was like, I was so stupid because I went to this guy's house wearing this ridiculous suit for a job that no one had applied for.
Corey knows how to tell a good story. I mean, you can't make this stuff up if you tried. So, Corey left his low suit behind and hit the road with his new boss to shear alpacas for months at a time, in search of something to heal his brokenness.
I was a broken soul, but I remember I wasn't very keen at the start. I was just sort of going through the motions. And the first sort of alpaca I saw was masculinely named Pikachu. And Pikachu headbutted me in the eye and cracked my cheekbone. And he got me real hard like a prize fighter. Something in me kept me going, and I ended up shearing alpacas with James for a few seasons.
Just a note here, James was Corey's boss. James Dixon, the alpaca shearer.
James kind of turned into my unofficial counsellor. We would spend so long in the car together.
James and Corey shore alpacas all around the country for a few years before Corey decided that he wanted to do more with his life. He studied animal technology and became an animal technician, working at several places around Sydney, RSPCA at Yagoona, Sydney Uni and Westmead. Although Corey's resume at this stage was longer than probably most retirees, there was a common thread that connected all these jobs.
As an Aboriginal man that is working in STEM and science, I realised that, throughout the journey, I'd met very few Aboriginal people in the animal industry or the science industry, and I wanted to do something about it. So I started going to these career days in Redfern and talking about science with young people. And it turned out that the same things that happened to me about, people telling me I couldn't do things and not having opportunities like books and things as a kid were the things that were still happening to these kids that happened to me. And I really wanted to do something about it. So I guess I did what most weird people do, and I started Googling remote schools and understanding that the problem was, it wasn't with these kids at all. They were really smart. It was just a lack of opportunity, the lack of resources. So I packed up every single book I owned, including that Reptiles in Colour book that I loved. And I found out schools are just really under-resourced. And I started sending these books away and started collecting books. And when I started collecting books, I found other problems where people would give me like Captain Cook's monologue or books they didn't really want to have or books that were in poor condition. So I started working a second job and I started paying for books and resources.
And so Deadly Science was born. From a man who just couldn't look away when he saw other kids going through what he went through. But for Corey, it wasn't just about the science. He had a deeper reason for all of this.
It starts with being a good person, because everyone that's a scientist, whether they agree with this or not, if they become a doctor, they're becoming a doctor to make people feel better. If they become a research scientist and they're looking at cancer cells, they're looking at a way to prevent a terrible disease that is making people feel sick. If they're an ecologist, they're trying to save the earth so we can enjoy it for the future. Every form of science is trying to make tomorrow better. And I think that the best part about science is that it gives us a passion and it also gives us a purpose. So I think that when we work with kids, it's not an outreach thing. I hate the word outreach. I hate the word can't. It's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between young people and this organisation. And I want to see kids in Australia, if none of them become scientists, then that's fine. But I want them to be brave, I want them to be deadly, and I want them to delete can't from their vocabulary.
Delete can't from your vocabulary. I mean, that's easier said than done, especially in communities where Indigenous kids can be locked up as young as 10 years old. A path that could have so easily been Corey's reality. And in a world where it's so easy to box children in as naughty or delinquent, Corey has a strong message.
Young people are allowed to get hurt, and they're allowed to make mistakes, and they're also allowed to heal. They're also allowed to learn from their mistakes. If we're going to lock people up based on their race for making one mistake and not give them the opportunity to learn, then we are doing a disservice to society, because those kids are not going to learn, right from wrong if they're going to get locked up every time. And for a lot of those kids that get in trouble, a cell might be the only time they get their own bed, or like their own room, or their 3 meals a day. So to really address the problem, we need to actually look at why, what other inequalities are leading to this, and how do we address it? For me, I can safely say Deadly Science has kept a few kids out of jail now, and a few kids from taking their own lives. But for me, it's what's on the side of your head. It's on each side is the easiest part, because you need to listen. And to listen, you need to have an open heart and an open mind. And it might be that, that you work with some kids and you think, wow, that's really naughty what they've done. But it doesn't matter what they've done as long as they learn from it. If we get in their mindset, hey, today's a fresh start, we're making tomorrow a better place, then they're going to be better people, and they're going to be better scientists. And hopefully, in time, society will be better.
Yeah, because I can imagine it's not just these kids' lives that are changing. It's society benefits from more First Nations kids becoming scientists.
Yeah, and their children's benefit as well from the opportunities. And, I've been honoured a lot with this thing that I founded, but the real benefits will be in generations' time. I've only been on this earth for 29 years. And, there's been times where I've probably been, self-indulgent when I'm younger. Like, it might be that I'm going to the pub and having a few beers, but there's more to life than that. And I'm very lucky that I get to live every day, helping kids, and then sometimes even older kids, find a passion and purpose and find a love of education, because, I feel that if I don't do that, my life's wasted, and I was put here for a reason. I was put here for a reason to help inspire.
And he has done exactly that. Corey still works full-time, multiple jobs. Deadly Science takes up the limited spare time that he has. To date, Corey and his team have distributed over 16,000 books, 500 telescopes, and received $33,000 in donations to help more than 110 communities across the country. I mean, what a resume. And when disaster hits, and it has multiple times in the last few years, Deadly Science are always there to pick up the pieces.
When things like COVID and bushfires and floods and things like that happen, education is so important, and resources for kids as well. Like, there's nothing better than giving a box of books to to a bunch of kids that have lost everything, because, at least for that one moment, if they pick up that book for 5 minutes, they're escaping from that devastating thing that's happened to them. So, one of the things that I like to do, and I'm a bit of a maverick, is when I see some of these things like that happen, especially up near my home, Telegraph Point School that got destroyed by the floods, I'll move heaven and earth to make something happen. And if it's something small like donating some books, like insurance can cover books, that's fine. But right there, right now, if I can provide that school and those students that have lost their classroom, and some of them have lost their homes, that bit of joy from opening up a Deadly Science box, then I think that that's a really good thing. When I really look back and I look back at Deadly Science and some of the things we've done, like we did a lot with the bushfires. We replaced a lot of the books that were burnt in schools, or even if they weren't burnt in schools, we provided kids with new books, kids that have lost everything. And then, you look at, when the original outbreak of the alpha strain happened in Melbourne, the first thing I did was get onto the local Aboriginal Land Council, and I sent them 300 books for the kids in the towers, the housing commission towers. Deadly Science cares, and it cares about these kids. We're not just providing a future, we're providing hope.
What does the future of Deadly Science look like?
With Deadly Science, we're ever evolving, and we're doing some STEM language stuff. I want to do more work in the youth detention sector. I want to make that educational poverty in Australia is a distant memory that we look back on and think, wow, why were we like this? That's my goal. I want to make, in 10 years, I don't even want to be leading Deadly Science. I want one of my kids to be leading it and leading the way. And I don't even want it to be a thing, really. I want it to be that we don't have educational poverty in Australia, that everyone's equal. And, we embrace First Nations science as well as, our own. We should be proud of it. I'll keep fighting the good fight, but I need you all with me.
Corey, I ask this at the end of every episode. How are you different now? How has Deadly Science changed your life?
I'm more open, and I'm more, I guess, patient with people and tolerant. You could win the lottery and you could win more money than what you can imagine, and you can have that nice new ute or buy that nice shiny house. But I can tell you that nothing fails in comparison to helping a kid learn how to read and then learn how to look through a telescope, or learn how to find a love of something that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives. And we talk about Gina Reinhardt, we talk about Elon Musk, we talk about Jeff Bezos, and we talk about Richard Branson and how they're going to space. And it's so great. Their lives are so great. But if we're going to measure richness, I'm richer than them because I get to experience this every day. And I hope when you follow Deadly Science and you come along too and you donate to us that you get to experience some of that, because I'm very lucky.
Thank you to Corey Tutt for sharing his story and also his wonderful work in Deadly Science. To read more about Deadly Science and to support his work, you can visit deadlyscience.org.au, and that information is in the show notes as well. If this episode affected you in some way and you need someone to talk to, Lifeline is available on 13 11 14. If you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to get future episodes in your feed and tell a friend about it. You can also leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on and tell us what you love about the podcast. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. I'll leave you with this. But ask the animals, and they will teach you. Or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you. Or let the fish in the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. Job chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.